goblins. Let's go. We're
Yeah,
live. Hello,
we're
everyone.
live. Hello. Hello. We're just deciding which conspiracy theory we're going to introduce the show with, but we've been told by YouTube that if we do that, then they'll demonetize us. The big bucks.
Right.
Did you see that? Completely unsurprisingly, loads of engagement bait Twitter accounts are based in kind of all kinds of random countries. That was funny. Not surprising, but it turned out they've added a location feature. That's the conspiracy theory for today that's been proved true.
That's pretty interesting. I mean, it's pretty good probably. So you can
Yeah.
it will
Learn
help
who
you
to ignore.
filter
Yeah,
more effectively. I won't tell you how to filter, but you'll be able to filter.
yeah.
However, that's not what we're
Yeah.
here to talk about today. Although
No,
I have a
that was the
very interesting
conspiracy theory for
lecture in
today.
mind with phrenology and
Yeah.
maybe some sort of
Phrenology is also
Neanderthal
real.
DNA.
Dude,
Just
that's another thing.
discussion,
Like,
but
we found that modern humans probably existed 8 million years ago. That's the late. Well, I think it's 3 million years ago, but yeah, another thing. Owlbears, as far as the eyes can see, across an endless horizon.
and with that we go into our actual topic. What are we here to discuss today, Owen?
The phrenology of D&D. So I think it was a question put or suggestion put by Howell in the comments last time, a regular viewer and friend of the channel, Howell, who was just saying, "Oh, have you thought about doing an episode about the implied setting of D&D?" And there's been a few conversations recently about it, and I guess you could take this different ways. You could say, "Oh, there's this setting that is the real setting of D&D, and you have to do that," or there's some kind of, in some way this is esoterica. Or you can say, and I think this is what we maybe you can define it in your own terms in a moment, Prince, but kind of what do the rules tell us about the world, and therefore what can we extrapolate about more rules and about the way the game works and about what the game should be like in experience. I guess that's something like it. Why don't you give it a definition?
Well, I would like to go back to the
implied setting of
probably
D&D.
The preface in the DMG kind of outlines the philosophy of the game and kind of talks about this. Like, to me, the quote unquote implied setting of Dungeons and Dragons, this is like a sort of like a framework, a series of like boundaries, with and associated with those boundaries, there's hierarchies of monsters, there's upper and lower limits to magic items, and all of this stuff sort of interacts. And the idea of it is basically is that with the assumption, at least of the DMG, is kind of like that you would make your own world, but that world would have enough in common with other D&D worlds to be sort of like broadly compatible and coherent, so that you would still be sort of participating in this shared activity that would be known as D&D.
Yeah, and
So
that's interesting to begin with, isn't it? Because
yeah.
how far is that a live idea? I mean, now, or in, let's say, in the last 15 years, when we think about the OSR or whatever, how far is it the case that anyone is thinking about, like, D&D is not a completely coherent setting across all games, but it is a continuous setting across all games. Like, it's something where, or theoretically, hypothetically, games should be able to share the same kind of assumptions and experience. How far is that something that you think has been live in the OSR?
Well, the OSR, it's been a series of like, I kind of like view it as maybe as a bit autistic, but this is a series of like, it's almost like waves of innovation. And like in the early OSR, you didn't even have you didn't have non D&D games at all.
Yeah.
People would just make adventures for the existing rule sets, and the only reason like retro clones originally came into being was because the original games were not easily available.
A
And
retro
that kind
clone
of,
being a copy, essentially, like a rewriting of the old rules, because you
yeah,
can
with
do that.
minor,
Rules are
yeah,
not copyrightable, so people were like, well, if I rewrite the rules of this version of D&D, people can play it legally, as it were. They can buy. Yeah. Great.
Yes, exactly. And then maybe with some tiny quality of life tweaks, but essentially, very often faithful copies. and this was kind of like normal. And I believe it was I got a, don't quote me on it, but I think, I don't know if it was Lamentations of the Flame Princess that was like the first sort of like deviant rule set. You had stuff before that kind of
in
like
every
started
sense
pushing
of
the
the
envelope.
word.
Well, obviously, but it was around that time, at least. Like I want to say something like 2011, when at first you started getting BX clones with like
So
more
basic expert
pronounced
D&D.
tweaks. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that kind of like opened the floodgates, and soon people started putting out games that were more and more extreme. And even on the sort of the adventure or campaign setting sort of front, there there was just kind of like this ethos of like, do it yourself and wild creativity, and that pushed the envelope further and further and further. And of course, inevitably, what you would see is, and in a way, again, Gygax's words here are sort of like oddly prophetic, is that at some point you reach a point where you're all trapped in this bubble called the OSR. But if you're on one end of the bubble and you see what the people on the other end of the bubble are doing, this is unrecognizable. And I guess people say, well, it doesn't matter, right? You can still all enjoy OSR, but the problem is that, again, if you no longer have a common language, so you just every channel that you attempt to use basically fills up with noise because you don't understand each other, and it creates a lot of friction. So eventually, you're
Yeah.
going to just sort of like split off and secede anyway. So the
I think,
movement just
and
kind of like
that's a
disintegrates.
general secession may be unfortunate in this context, but there's something there generally about shared culture. What I mean is that's
Sure.
something you can look at any example of shared culture is that you see fissure, whether it's in artistic movements, intellectual movements, society, social movement, and you have a lot of disagreement within a shared culture, but eventually if that disagreement is beyond the code, but I'm being very postmodern, I know, but beyond the code, then it becomes secessional, doesn't it? It becomes like oh no, it doesn't make sense for us to talk. It becomes
you
impossible
have
to talk
so
about it.
few common ground that the amount of effort you need to put into communication increases as the number of commonalities decrease, and the amount of projected sort of like yield you can get from any interaction or perspective also similarly diminishes. So at some point, even though you maybe would be able to talk to someone, there'd be nothing useful that they have to tell you, because what they're doing is too different from what you're doing. So it doesn't make sense. So so taking that and now going back to sort of D&D, so that's kind of like the state of the OSR. And then of course I feel that there's the very different, the sort of you have sort of the fringes of the OSR that have almost that are also, they're not that much into like original D&D so much. They kind of like do their own thing, so they sort of naturally kind of like gravitate away. There's not enough keeping them here. That's fine with me. There's also a movement that kind of like has gone back, has cast off a lot of like the chaff. Again, your dice drop rules, you're overloading the encounter table, all this sort of quote unquote wisdom that the OSR has accumulated. We don't really need that. But maybe some of the adventures that came out in the meantime would be kind of cool. So let's keep those, or like the odd rule here and there. But okay, so going back to, I guess, this idea of like the implicit setting, I think the irony of all of this shit and all of this spiel is that if you are a player of AD&D, which I guess we are, to a lesser degree, second edition is less obtuse, and less ambiguous. But if you play first edition D&D, the interesting part is that even though I just said like all of these different rule sets are actually create a lot of like fucking noise and nonsense, playing AD&D for any amount of time sort of automatically converts it into something unique, because there's a ton of sort of it's kind of open-ended. You have you're one of the most complicated rule systems and comprehensive rule systems ever made, but it's like 90 to 95% complete, and you're going to have to make all of these calls and like interpret things sort of maybe holistically or according to the spirit of the rules. So you're going to end up with something that's even if you wanted to keep it like as faithful as possible, it's still going to be like something of your own, reflect your own sort of like predilections and way of gaming.
Yeah. A comparison story that comes to mind. I mean, yeah, you're talking about the ambiguity is past the discussion we'll have to have about first edition AD&D and OD&D, because there may be some differences. OD&D being the original 1973, 1974 release, but yeah, I was saying like a comparison, because I play Advanced Squad Leader ASL, and ASL has a really interesting publishing history that's similar to AD&D. What I mean, relatively. What I mean is there's this game, Squad Leader, and you have squads of guys, and then they released gamettes, extra, which were mini expansions, which some of them were standalone as well. But like, oh yeah, this one adds Americans, this one adds French, this one adds late war, and then they got to a point of being like, the rules are a massive mess and they're incoherent because they've been added to ad hoc. So let's codify them as a game, and that's it's a 4.7 something weight on Board Game Geek. It's like over 95% weight. It's one of the heaviest games people practically play.
5 being like the absolute max of
5 being the absolute
complexity to get into.
The theoretical complexity being good. 5. But yeah, and it's a fun game. It takes a lot to learn. It's a lot harder than other games which theoretically are similar. It's a lot harder in lots of ways. But there's a game it's designed to run, and essentially it can run stuff, the ASL rules, between about 1930 and 1953, let's say, or maybe a bit later, 1956.
And you've got like perfect resolution, essentially, right?
Yeah. Essentially, it's incredible. And if you don't, you just add more. If you don't, you go like, okay, well, maybe. And that's of course past. They don't want to add too many more big modules because the whole point is it's codified. But to a significant degree, there's so much flexibility in there. There's so much potential detail, and there's so many mechanics for doing stuff. You just go like, okay, well, to do that, we'll just do this. To replicate that. There's systems like caves. Caves are like several pages of rules that are incredibly complicated that virtually no one uses, but people who are into Pacific gameplay with Japanese islands use a lot. Things like that. And I think AD&D has this parallel, that there is this thing it can do, and there's a massive range of things it can do to a fairly high resolution. But the implied setting kind of bounds that. That's kind of what I'm seeing implied setting as, is it bounds the things that AD&D can do well. Does that make sense?
I think so. Even more importantly, and this is also mentioned in the preface there, it's
I think about reading some of it in a minute.
Well, we should do that. Well, and this is, I think, where we sort of we break off from like simulationists. It's this idea that not only there's a very fairly large sort of like framework of AD&D, of like what is like possible, and that it just sets sort of like the boundaries. And again, in your own campaign, maybe you can do 10th level spells or something like that. Maybe you'll add like something esoteric, or you'll tinker a bit. But these boundaries really are kind of like, they're there for a reason, and I feel like tinkering with those is like the will quickly sort of push your game out of alignment. But even within those boundaries, it kind of says that like it cautions you against having games that are kind of like too strange, that kind of like stray too far from kind of like the ethos and the assumptions of the game, right? Again, it's sort of like outlining like, okay, this is also like what D&D is for. So I think you'd be able to I guess within the implicit setting of AD&D, you can do quite a bit. Again, if you just looking at the Gamma World or the Boot Hill conversion stuff, you could put fucking laser guns in there, all sorts of crazy stuff. But as soon as you get away from like sort of the adventuring kind of like ethos of it all, I feel it probably
and of course the parallel there is like, these are games also based around going on an adventure, and it's a kind of wargamey, mechanically wargamey adventure. And so you can dip into those. I think it's an interesting thing. So you said about simulation. Interesting, ASL, though, incredibly detailed, and in some cases people are like, oh, this is way too detailed. I don't know, it's so detailed. There's an irony that it's also very clearly not simulationist in the sense that the role-playing game acts, either the D&D spin-off Axis, which is obviously a system we respect. And it's not necessarily a simulationist in every way, but because ASL is kind of like movies, it's more meant to present a situation like A Bridge Too Far than actual detailed World War II squad combat. And you get people saying, oh, what I hate about ASL is this thing. Sorry to nerd out here, or specifically make the point. People say, oh, most infantry fire was suppressive, so you should have a suppression system that is much more important than a damage system. But ASL privileges damage and routing over suppression. Suppression is a very small thing that happens. And you're like, yeah, I don't care.
Well, yeah. Would it make the game more fun if everybody just hunkers down for like so many turns behind cover?
You can have a system like that. You can have a system like that, of course. But you're like, it's weird to be like, oh, my real problem with this system is it doesn't. I just really want to completely see. And I'm not saying by the way,
faithful recreation.
It's something where there's a certain amount of basically. We've said with the AD&D before, there is granularity in some places and we're zoomed out in some places.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same thing with ASL. And Gary says the same stuff, both in the DMG and elsewhere, essentially that the game focuses on the stuff that matters to make it a good game. And it is simulationist to the precise degree needed for that, not for this other cause.
Yeah, the more explicit example would be in something like when it discusses experience gaining and it says, well, it's not very realistic, all this money, and but it goes into like why basic. The short of it is that it's there because it's cool, because in the sort of fantastical fiction that it's meant, that it's sort of like that inspired it. You would have heroes with large hoards of gold and all that stuff. So that's why there's so much stuff there.
Indeed. It does amuse me, by the way, that we've had two different friends of the channel, or friends of ourselves. We're both Alexander Macris, the creator of Axe, but also our friend Particularist, have both been like, I looked at a bunch of things about whether or not some of the costs and some of the kind of financial flows make sense, and they are kind of more accurate than people say they are. Like, the irony is him making up this Kugel saga economy, Fafnir the Grey Mouser economy, ended up within an order of magnitude, which was the relevant thing. I think that's what particular.
Wasn't he an actuary or an accountant or something like that?
Yeah,
he worked for an insurance company or something like that.
I think he worked for an insurance company.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, exactly. But exactly, you're like, the thing is, you're like, no, it's if you think you need to be any more accurate than that, like, the whole point is actual historians aim for within the order of magnitude, as it were, to be like,
oh yeah,
no,
and
are you when you're extrapolating, are you somewhere near, not are you exact?
The costs of hiring like a character of at least, I think it was like 6th level to be an instructor, and then taking into account how rare these people would be and like all that stuff, like it somehow magically makes it kind of like all aligns in this sort of bizarre inflated gold rush economy that he posits.
And that's the one thing, is you're assuming it's an economy with a fairly ubiquitous supply of precious metal. We'll come back to that though. What follows herein is strictly for the eyes of you, the campaign referee, as the creator and ultimate authority in your respective game, etc. When you build the campaign, you will tailor it to suit your personal tastes. In the heat of play, it will slowly evolve into a compound of your personality, and those of your better participants, a superior alloy. And as long as your campaign remains viable, it will continue a slow process of change and growth. In this lies a great danger, however. The systems and parameters contained in the whole of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons are based on a great deal of knowledge, experience gained through discussion, play, questioning, and hopefully personal insight.
Wait, Owen.
Yes.
Advanced Dungeons. I thought this was Cairn. You're reading from
the implied setting of Cairn.
Okay,
what is the implied setting of Cairn?
I was like, why is he reading the preface to Cairn? But
this is Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
Really? That's in there.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I'll continue, please.
I think there's two things there though to draw out before continuing. One is and that is, on the one hand, he says there will be an evolution of personalization of the campaign based on you and your better participants. I think that is such an interesting thing to say, isn't it?
He always had that sort of like the ability to differentiate that kind of sets him apart. He always saw like so many layers and categories and everything, so including in his players, of course. And
there's a reason why he ends up being like, ooh. One system you could use to encourage people to play their character's class and race in terms of to use those skills and to fulfill that function in play is to give people a grade rating which multiplies negatively, essentially inversely multiplies their
yeah, exactly.
grading.
Yeah.
I think this is interesting because in terms of my theory, I've never seen a direct proof of it other than it almost must be the case. In second edition, there is, and I do use some of these rules, an optional rule to do with class-based experience, like as in you can get, if you use a spell, that you get 50 XP or whatever.
Right.
And you can tell almost certainly this must be an attempt to manage the same problem or question of how do you encourage players to do things their class and race would do, because that's what role-playing is here. And it's interesting because Gary's just like, no, we're going to start grading players. Very high trust society thing, very much a thing you can do on a table at Lake Geneva. But yeah, I was going to say, just to say yes, Henchman 52. Here we go. Beck Me, our favorite. The only version of D&D I play is I learned it from Frank Menzer himself. In fact,
rule cyclopedia.
Yeah.
version of Beck Me. Yeah.
We'll go through this. Mark asked, what if you had to go into D&D? What race, class, etc. would you be? I would be a half-orc fighter cleric, because as a multi-class, the XP is quite generous in terms of advancing, and you get a really good mixture of powers with good HP. So I'd be very good at low levels, and then I'd retire and let the humans do the rest of the work at high levels.
I guess human wizard, and then grind the first.
You're letting me carry the party. I'm carrying the party for the first 4 levels, and then I stop being able to level.
Wait and throw darts for the most part. Complain also that you need protection constantly, and then there's that one moment when you shine, and then okay, well, I cast my spell. Let's get the fuck out of here. Come on, guys. And wait until you get a wand. Yeah.
I would say that I've said this. We've talked about this before. My one problem with the theory that wizards are purely geometric and that is a mechanical problem is I'm like, so you didn't give your wizards darts and you didn't get your DM didn't put a wand in the game when you were 2nd or 3rd level. Are the 2 things that have gone wrong there?
You'd need a good wand. Yeah.
I would say, because I randomly generate lots of my treasure, you get a lot of stuff. This is good, by the way, not bad. I showed you actually these scrolls that they found in the Ghoul's Lair, didn't I? That I was like, wow, which I randomly generated. I DM'd you.
I'd be interested in seeing if you would have a party that didn't have any fighters, but instead would just use clerics as a sort of linebackers to just basically protect the wizards. There would probably be encounters where you would do well, but I feel you really need fighters for certain problems that show up later in the game.
I was going to say, let's say you replaced the 2 fighters. Let's say you replace the 2 fighter types with an extra cleric and an extra wizard. That's probably the way to think about it, isn't it?
Yeah.
In that case, you have okay damage output and okay toughness because of armor plus hopefully okay AC, and you just make sure the clerics have constitution. But even at low levels, you're not cleansing mooks as quickly because of in 1st edition AD&D, you're not getting as many attacks, is what I'm referring to. 2nd edition, you're not getting specialist weapon specialization. So either way, you're reduced in the number of attacks against smaller enemies, at least.
I don't think that would matter that much. You would have presumably you'd have a couple of spell slots to.
I was going to say it's that your second. Yeah, I think it's that you'd need to make sure that you had your cleric players would need to be smarter than the average cleric player. Cleric players aren't stupid, but they would have to be smarter because they'd have to make some very good choices about carrying those extra spells, especially because they can get bonus spells at 1st level. The extra wizard is giving you 1 spell at 1st and 2 spells at 2nd level.
It would take a while for it to get good. Yeah. I guess you would just get hard countered by golems, ghosts. Well, you could turn ghosts, I guess, but there's anything with serious defenses against spellcasting would ruin you. So I guess D&D is a pretty okay game when all things are considered. Maybe that wouldn't be so good. Maybe fighters have a purpose.
Yeah, maybe fighters are not complete trash. Yeah, right. Even at a high level. We'll talk about that another time. We'll do a class discussion sometime. I think that'd be interesting.
Right.
but so on the one hand, there is this superior alloy of better participants than you, but on the other hand, there are limitations, checks, balances, and all the rest are placed into the system to assure that what is based thereon will be a superior campaign, which offers the most interesting play possibilities to the greatest number of participants for the longest period of time possible. You as referee will have to devote countless hours of play to do this. Naturally, everything possible cannot be included in the whole of the work. As a participant in the game, I would not care to have anyone tell me exactly what must go in a campaign, how it must be handled. If not, why not play a game like chess? As the author, I also realize the limits to my creativity and imagination. He's kind of being equivocal to some degree. He's saying, look, I'm attempting to give you a lot of wisdom from having played several times a week for 5 years, 6 years when I'm writing this. I think that's the point, isn't it? He's saying, look, there is a game that is actually here and is tested and works, and he takes a while, and this is Gygaxian, he circumlocutes occasionally. But I wonder, he's obviously going to get to the point of saying it will eventually become unrecognizable as a D&D game. But he's saying, look, I'm not trying to order you around. I'm not trying to tell you what to include. But these limitations and checks and balances help you have a better experience. Do you think that's true? Do you think he actually thought that his rules should be followed? Or do you think that was all
It was all about money.
Yeah.
I
And or
no,
was it an esoteric metaphor? I don't know.
it was
Like,
not.
what do you think?
No, no, no. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I don't mind taking it as at face value because his motivation is kind of irrelevant because he was right. Like in order to sort of maintain coherent as a hobby, some sort of like underlying commonality is required. And part of that I think is also like the implied setting of D&D, which to me really is sort of like uh it's almost like one of the most important things he does is not that often talked about, but he creates this entire sort of hierarchy as well of threats from the highest to the lowest, right? An entire sort of magical sort of food chain, food pyramid or food chain with its apex predators existing in not just in different terrains, because
Mostly
he also
disenchanters. At the top, it's disenchanters.
Well, if you carry magic items, sure, but like it's interesting though. It goes from like poisonous centipede all the way up to like demogorgon. Here you go, right? And it's kind of like where he creates this sort of like vast kind of framework, and he does something similar with all these magic items, and that kind of like gives you um it's almost like you have a compass. You have all these sort of points for reference, and that's why I think even like mundane animals, the reason he included all of that, there's tons of reasons for it. Like not just that in Sword and Sorcery, very often the protagonists would fight mundane animals, but also just so you have something like normal as well to compare it to, right? Like if you want to make a new monster, you can always go like, would this be tougher than a wolf? How tough is a wolf, right? You can always just reference all these these sort of compass points, and that really allows you to like very precisely kind of like put your monster somewhere in there, and to give it a place in the D&D world equal to its power. And that's kind of like the advantage of it.
Hench says the top of the pyramid is centipedes covering the entire world.
Just more, it's a centipede with 40 hit dice. Yeah, exactly.
It's
more
Peach Jam.
It's what?
Peach
All
Jam.
right.
That's what I said. It's like Bear
Yes.
Jam.
Yes. Anyway, Peach Jam it is. Yeah. No, but yeah, that's why I guess so this and let's say you would now looking at like the sort of like framework, I guess treat it as M. John Harrison treats his. I don't know if have you ever read M. John Harrison?
I
Like
own Viriconium, but I haven't read it. I was planning to read it this year, and I don't know if I will.
Okay.
Just because of the time pressure, but yeah, I have it.
Well,
you go. Go ahead.
It's a example with an asterisk, and the reason I use it as an example is because not many people do it like that. It's he's written a trilogy in this about this sort of like science fantasy city of Viriconium, which takes place in it's sort of an era after humanity has gone, it's almost like sort of Book of the New Sun-esque, where
Yeah,
humanity
it's a
has
dying
once
Earth
gone to
kind
the
of.
stars. Yeah,
Yeah, post astronaut
right.
dying Earth. Yeah, is my understanding.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and now they're in the they call them the afternoon cultures, basically. So
Mm,
you've got essentially people that have regressed severely and are now living in the sort of the ruins and the remnants of a much greater place. But the point is that his books aren't exactly sequels. It's almost like um they don't even really take place in the same continuity. There's details that differ, but they use many of the same themes and elements, so they kind of like echo each other. And the third one is very strange and it really deviates quite a bit from the first two.
mm,
But it's a similar idea you should probably apply to sort of like D&D, where I think you could probably alter it really doesn't matter that much. Well, wait a minute. You can alter quite a bit in the sort of the lower strata, like the kind of like in the building blocks area. You can omit monsters. You can
mm,
permit other monsters. Magic items. Ditto. Maybe alter some spells. Maybe even like
mm,
one race or one class different. But as the degree of change increases, and as you sort of like move up to more far-reaching and invasive changes, like say altering an entire class or adding an entire class is actually quite invasive, right? Like because that's
mm,
something that is going to take place over, however many levels the player is expected to play. But whatever
mm.
change you make is going to have a larger impact, I feel, than any single like an orc. Changing an orc is not going to matter because you have
No.
all this other shit besides orcs. Um,
Yeah, I was going to
but
say, yeah, you
yeah,
could run an entire game without any orcs, certainly.
yes. Right. Yeah. Orcs is like one of the best examples of something that's like totally replaceable because you have all these different other humanoids,
Yeah.
or you have humans and bandits and all this shit. Yeah, exactly. Right. But the point is that like as you move up, at some point you're going to, I feel like, stray uh, considerably, and especially if you start moving into like I think mechanics. That's I think
Mm,
the area where you're most likely to sort of like um, lose that sort of commonality with that
mm.
coherence with other people that play D&D. If you're going
Yeah.
to like
I was,
overhaul the entire combat system and all that shit.
yeah, well, you see this happen in late-ish second edition, 2.5, the player
Right.
option book, um, where you're like, oh, okay, we're gonna, which are basically largely not good books, for various reasons. I use one spell from one of them, but the point is that like they're like it's a proto D20
3E.
system thing of like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like how far can we have much more pseudo granular combat mechanics that are mostly, give players way more choice about creation and about what you do in combat in a way that doesn't serve the core gameplay loops of D&D, not because combat doesn't matter, but because what matters in combat is not that. As in it's about the level of resolution, and about whether the resolution adds anything or detracts. And yeah, and I think that's a good example of there where you say, oh well, what you could say is, and this was never, I'm sure, actually a problem at the time, but you can imagine someone saying, oh, in my game we create characters and run the game like this, and then you're like, oh, can I bring my 7th level character over to your campaign? And they're like, okay, yeah, sure. And you're like, oh, by the way, I'm using all the stuff from player options. Then suddenly that's going to seem much less viable, because it's like, oh, you brought a character from 3rd edition to play a 2nd edition game almost.
So
So yeah,
something is like
yeah,
lost in translation. Yeah,
yes,
sure. That's a good example of like where I guess uh like where it breaks down.
mm,
I can also envision if you uh, uh I kind of wonder I don't think maybe people have done that. It doesn't make sense that I was thinking like what would happen if you would just you know, not only do you include all of these, futuristic technologies from, maybe Gamma World or Metamorphosis Alpha or, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks,
yeah,
but you also strip out most of the medieval aspects, and it's almost like
yeah,
you run some sort of space fantasy or even science fiction. I feel you would have replaced so many parts that it's. I don't think people do that now because there's other games that are a much better sort of like place to start.
You say this
But
very you're
interesting thought
very
experiment.
hopeful, aren't you? I think you do see a lot of discussion even now on. I'm thinking about places. I'm thinking mostly I see it via subreddits, but you do see. I've seen it on Discords as well. But Discords tend to be more siloed.
Right.
But subreddits, you'll get stuff like r/OSR or r/D&D or r/RPG, where you can tell people are just really people who are into the hobby, the sub hobby or side hobby of rules creation and system management, who are like,
Yeah.
oh, I want to use this, but for this. And of course, sometimes they might actually have an idea, but mostly they don't. And it's something where they're using the wrong tool. This is part of what we want to talk about today, I guess, and what we are talking about is that there is, as we say, ASL can handle 1930 to 1955. There is the implied setting from the rules allows you to know what it can do and what it's going to do well. And it's a similar thing here where we're saying, if you said we're going to use the class system, but we're not going to use any medieval things, there's not going to be like, that we're going to change the armor rules and so it will work differently. And we're going to only have lasers. Then suddenly you'd be
I
like,
feel you'd
yeah,
get away with
yeah.
what is it, golden age sort of like
Mm.
space opera, Buck
Yeah,
Rogers,
yeah.
Flash Gordon style
I,
stuff. I
I
think.
John Carter of Mars. John
Right.
Carter sword fights people. So
Yes.
albeit there's maybe a different vibe there. I think as in though I think John Carter and generally speaking Burroughs is a very important Appendix N entry. At the same time, there is the swashbuckling element. D&D doesn't always buckle swashes. There is a bit more kind of grimy, nasty, bloody Conan / Fafford style combat. I think typically that's the vibe you get from it. A lot more beyond the Black River
Well,
than
yeah, I was about to
yeah.
say like there's this sort of the beautiful period that everybody experienced level 1 to 3 before you know you get to the point where you would
Yeah,
be
yeah,
sort of comparable to one of those characters. That's the sort of muddy throwing lamp oil at
yeah,
rats, having like
yeah.
melting or having your
I'd
like
say
breaking
a
your
thing
legs
where
in a pit trap.
I
Yeah.
partially disagree with our learned friends. As in, I do agree. The idea that you can just skip, and Gary says this. Does say you can start characters at high levels. Third level, there's a reason people might see that as the full entry into D&D. Absolutely. But there is a certain pleasure and joy as long as you see it as transient to those low levels where, especially if you're in a different setting or you're using different characters, I think, different character types, where there can be a certain joy or pleasure in, again, throwing lamp oil at rats, essentially.
Um, I'm revving up like a bunch of like new players. Some of my
Mm,
friends have been asking to try out D&D, so I'm looking into starting something up within a reasonable time. But there, I think I'm just gonna have them start at one. Like obviously we're playing AD&D, so
mm,
again max hit points at first level. Generous ability score requirements, all that stuff, or at least make sure everybody has at least 115, all that shit,
yeah.
to just make it go a bit smoother. But yeah, and I think like why not, right? It's kind of it does. I think it serves to introduce you to like a certain to certain elements of the game. But once those elements have been introduced and inculcated, replaying the game is, I think, or at those levels is not necessarily as valuable as just starting a bit higher when you have a bit more capabilities, I think.
I'll catch up on it. It's actually just random. It's just random, just random. Yeah, don't let green slime get it to the surface. It's a nanotech apocalypse. Um,
The
green
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 slime
slime
was
would be bad.
it doesn't do well in alcohol. It probably doesn't do well in sunlight either. I feel like
Mm.
just the lack of humidity or just maybe the open sun, it would do terrible.
And in Deathstalker, energy weapons, one-shot musket-style weapons, bastard fought with independent volleys of laser fire, followed by engagement with swords and bayonets. I mean, but random, didn't you know, actually, very rarely did you have sword and bayonet combat in the Napoleonic Wars, actually. Anyway,
Oh dear.
yeah,
I
actually.
mean,
Uh,
Oh, well, okay, I see what you're doing. Very good.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I mean, having yeah, I guess it's also
yeah.
like something to think about, that there is this. Well, it's not just the implied setting of D&D, but there's
Mm,
an implied. The implied setting is constructed around an implied sort of interaction between these different roles that the players play. Again, like cleric, thief, fighter, wizard, and um, the opponents, which are kind of like. Uh, it's almost like they're questions that those classes are meant
yes,
to
random.
answer, right? Like I think
Yeah.
I may have said. So um, this is again one where uh, it's perfectly acceptable to pick and choose, to remove elements, to supplement elements, and so on and so forth. But if you would throw out the entire thing, right? You go full
Mm,
on Empire of the Petal Throne style. Even that is
mm.
actually fine. But that sort of that underlying, that underlying interaction, all that stuff is you're gonna it's almost like it needs endpoints. Those elements still need to be in the game, or you're going to have like a bunch of vestigial material, and maybe you'll strip that out too. But then, the game gets less interesting, and you have to come up with like something else, or it's like you've dumbed it down. So,
Well, yeah, I think there's an
you know,
interesting point there that if you say, "Oh, I'm thinking," we must imagine briefly that we've fallen down the stairs onto our head and we've decided to get into r/RPG design discussions.
oh my
But
god, yeah,
there's a thing where someone might say, "Well, I loved D&D is a great game. I like some things about it, but I really." And I would say, as you say, you can subtract things, and there's good examples of where, like Seven Voyages of Silithan, where the cleric doesn't exist, and that's a game people like. But you can say, I like this, but I just I don't get wizards. Like advancing magic has never made sense to me. I just think it's stupid, so I want to change it, and I'm going to do something different. And of course, it could be that you come up with a good idea, but you have to think about what function in the actual game that exists, and the world that therefore that you're kind of playing a game in, is being removed. And I suppose it's the thing is that wizards are, let's say, the idea of the wizards, the magic user, whatever, is the exercise of extreme and sometimes uncontrolled force. There's a sort of the flashy and explosive effect, even if it's a utility spell. It's like, yeah, oh yeah, I'm just going to have a disc carry around my stuff, actually. Like this idea of the flashy and the expansive, as opposed to the targeted or passive. It's
oh,
active typically. And if you say, well, I don't want that, then problem, and I don't want anything like it, then suddenly any problem that requires that or can benefit from having that kind of active, expansive, explosive power exercised against it, that becomes a bigger problem, or it can't be solved. Like
well,
wizard lock being solved by knock, as an example.
not having a wizard would mean, like, what is a wizard if you break it all down, right? And the
Hmm.
I mean, the wizard, for the most part, all of these spells represent. It's almost they're like solutions again
Mm.
to problems. And in some cases, these problems are monsters with hit points, right? But in very
Mm.
often, it's like you're posed with a challenge that would otherwise be very daunting or formidable to solve. Like, but suddenly you can levitate, you can fly, you can
Mm.
teleport.
Mm.
You can use telekinesis or unseen servant to reach through
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the bars of some place and like fuck around with that. And you know that's actually what a lot of these spells really are.
Mm.
And these spells are also made to like usually at least very often when we play the wizard, like one, maybe two or three at later levels, but like in the beginning, one spell like that sleep spell is just like
Mm.
encounter
Yeah,
ends immediately, right? You knock them
yeah.
all down. So
Oh, and it's satisfying, and it was though it's a bit. One thing, of course, is it's a discrete 100% usage. So
yeah,
it's not like hit points, and it's not like attacking with a sword. It's a discrete 100% usage of a consumable, albeit a daily
right,
consumable.
yeah,
And so
and
yeah,
and
go
that
for it.
that lip it's like the fighter is sort of like is a
Random.
reliable output over time, and the wizard is burst, right? Like
Mhm.
it really is like that.
Yeah,
Except that like you're not just doing combat, you can do all of this other shit as well. But like it really is like that. You can
yeah.
almost, with almost perfect certainty, you can circumvent an obstacle, right?
I was going to
um
say, random says Wizard Jim. The example that's always in my mind is things like petrifaction. and petrification or level drain, if you don't have stone flesh or restoration, I would say even if the PCs don't have it, if it's not something that exists in the world because you don't like clerical magic, so you're like, well, I got rid of that. Well, then suddenly those things are lethal, aren't they? You know, they're
Yeah, and
just,
it's
or
something
at
that
least debilitating.
it's something that OSR games actually started fucking up for a while by removing Raised Dead because they didn't like it aesthetically, right? But then they don't realize that's actually one of the worst things I think you can do, in my opinion, to remove Raised Dead. It really is like very much part of the default assumptions of the game. Removing Raised Dead and then still playing old school D&D is insanity. Because the entire game is kind of based around the idea that you can come back from the dead, right?
Yeah. Oh
That's
no,
the
I think that's an
lethality is
interesting.
calibrated for
There's an
that.
interesting point there. Implied setting. You
Yeah.
could say, well, Raised Dead's a 5th level spell, so it can't be that important. But of course, well, no, because once you're 3rd level and beyond, it begins to make increasing financial sense. This was actually a whole thing that one of my kind of hardcore STEM players of the Greyhawk game worked out. It was like, I don't think it is worth raising my 2nd level character for these mathematical reasons. But once you're high enough level, and that's not even that high, you're going to want to start raising Dead pretty quickly, and it won't cost that much compared to the investment you put into that character if you can get access to it. And you could say, well, no, but you don't need it. It doesn't matter if they die. Maybe you just let players start higher level. And that's all kind of true. But the whole thing is the lethality of the world partly is answered by, this is an OSR mistake, yeah, that you're pointing at. The lethality of the world in the old school games is answered by the incredibly powerful solutions. Yeah, you can be petrified, but stone to flesh exists. Yes, you have level drain. Ethereal undead are a massive screw you. Same with ethereal undead aging you, massive screw you. But there are solutions to that. They're not.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. You know, the point
aging
is
you is actually an example of like something that is. It's almost like it's almost like you have a set of permanent. You take permanent damage.
No, yeah,
Almost. Like,
I agree. But
yeah.
what I mean is these things tend, I say, they have solutions in the game. Most of these things, they are things like there are really powerful things that are bad that happen to you, but there are equally powerful solutions. And if you want to use the term power fantasy, the power fantasy is pointing you towards that. You know what I mean? Like the power fantasy is saying you can go and get this. And you see this in game design. We didn't actually discuss it much, but just discuss. I mentioned pre-stream I've been playing Hollow Knight, and then we got into our phrenology discussion. But the one thing with that is how much everything says, look, you're not good at doing this now, or you can't do this now, but later you're going to power that lets you do this. Like there are things where the game tells you very early on, as you cannot do this now, there must be a power that solves that problem. And part of the point of advancement and discovery is that you're like, I want to find out how I can solve these other problems and explore these other things. So yeah.
Yes, I was just about to bring it up. Yeah, that's I think it is defensible if you set the it's okay if you say in my game everybody starts at 3. However,
because the stakes then are your 3rd level, so
right.
that is the
however
level, yeah.
Once you've set that bar, you can't make a rubber band bar, I think. Then it's well, I feel okay. I'm divided on this actually. So if you play with a bunch of guys and everybody else has, even if you have multiple characters, which you really should, but like or whatever, the quote unquote core party is like 8th level, right? And then you come trudging on with 3rd level. I think you might still be sort of useful, but if they're 9th or something like that, the things that challenge a group of like 9th level characters, if a 3rd level character, if you step out of line, you're like sort of incinerated or obliterated.
Yeah, no, indeed.
It's almost like you would have to not retire, but like put the high level characters on ice, or maybe take one and then slum it for a while. And
certainly stable play is
level.
one of the solutions to this. I agree, and I think the I'm trying to think. Very occasionally in some games I've been like, oh yeah, just start your character at 2nd level, to join an adventure. But of course the other solutions do that. I would say this is cheating, but it's not cheating, is to say also, well, one thing that's not cheating is if you have been raising henchmen as you should do, they are already leveled. another thing which is Gary-esque and cheating but not cheating is you might encounter leveled characters in the dungeon. G1, for instance, has in the dungeon level 2 nicely leveled characters. When we run that, in that case, the dwarf they freed remained an ally. So essentially, for me, allies are similar level characters who might choose to help, and whereas the elf swears a year of service. And I said to a player who wanted to run him, I was like, well, I said, you can run him rather than me running him. And so I was like, yeah, in that case, the party has just gained an 8/5th wizard or whatever, with fighter magic user.
I mean,
and
that
that's
works
good.
Great.
That's not bad. That's not the same thing as removing the stakes. It's actually about, you've gained a year of service from this guy because you succeeded.
Yeah, or even the the sort of like the random adventuring parties that are included in the standardized sort of dungeon tables in the back of AD&D. Even those are sort of like worth considering as I don't know if you might be able to ally with them if you take them prisoner.
Yeah.
They're not too high. If they're sort of vaguely compatible in
the whole point
alignment.
is that has happened. Diegesis, diegetic, I know it's a bit of a boogeyman word, but the importance of it being a diegetic achievement is that it's mattered in the world. You've earned it in the world. It's not like you just said to the players, "Oh, just have an 8th level character. It's fine. Who cares?" It's that they've freed this guy. He's become one of their friends, and so I'm like, yeah, he's given you a year of service. You can run him. As long as you're not doing anything that would break his loyalty, like you're not telling him to commit suicide, just run him. It doesn't matter. I do the same with henchmen. For henchmen, generally speaking, I'll be like, look, if it's a loyal henchman, you run him, because it's your sub.
Yeah, unless you give certain commands would trigger a loyalty check, but otherwise,
exactly. At which point I then
control.
check that or determine that. Yeah.
And in combat, if people, I always go like, if people don't give, I always find it very stupid. If people don't give orders to the henchmen in combat, I always go like, okay, I guess I'll do something, right? But it's not going to be very good. Like, no, you got to order your henchmen around, dude. It's your character.
Yeah.
Right. It's true that it's not that it's unworkable, right? But I would. First of all, you can definitely, depending on how your DM does treasure XP, because there's nothing in the DMG that says that you have to equally divide the treasure that you find. In fact, even the opposite may, in some cases, be true. So you could very conceivably power level that small guy through a bunch of halls, but then of course, he would be in AD&D at least. He would be training, so then he's out again for a week, and like again, there's this. I just imagine all of this sort of like extra sort of logistical, like this hassle, and he essentially just has to sort of sit back, and then the DM has to say, no, hold on a fucking minute. If you're not going to do anything, right, you get a training grade F, okay, all right, you better, like, you guys better pay through the fucking roof for this. So then they start grumbling, like, I just feel there are probably situations where maybe you can boost it a little bit at some point, and unless they take heavy casualties, in which case you say like, oh, okay, well, there's one 8th level character left, the rest starts at 3 again. Tough shit, guys, pick something easier, and then the 8th level guy will have a pretty easy time, and it's probably pretty fun, actually, just raffle stomping through a I mean, imagine fighting so they come up with like, oh, it's an orc fortress, and you have cloud kill, and now you finally have an excuse to just to open with that and slaughter large amounts of humanoids.
Yeah, I was going to say that is again something you do see in I'm thinking mostly about, it is actually something you definitely see in levelable RPG video games, like ones where you're not gaining small incremental things. You're like, oh no, I was 1st level, now I'm 10th level, that kind of thing. In that kind of game, you do sometimes get a thing, you can see the designers set up something, the devs set up something where you just get to destroy, like, you're no longer fighting like, oh, I remember when I used to have to fight one of these on his own and it'd take ages. Now you're just like murdering 30 of them with a couple of effects. And I think that's
strong.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of it, is that kind of sense of ascent. One thing I thought actually might be interesting, given what we said, is I've got the 1E spells in front of me because it helps us delineate the classes a bit better. But what problems are in the world? Let's talk about clerics. I mean, we can just talk about first level spells.
One
I will
one moment. Uh,
go
there,
for it.
there's something that actually you said that I want to respond to is that
Do the
actually
thing.
here we go again into sort of like implied setting and hierarchy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The the I kind of like it that at some point, um, it's almost like AD&D at some point says like, listen, this used to be very dangerous. This is now
Mm,
no longer a problem. You're at this level now. Okay,
mm,
enough, right? Here you get protection from normal weapons, or you get cloud kill. Okay, so the enemy has 100 orcs. Fuck you. It's not a problem anymore. Okay,
mm.
you're at this point. No, 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 no. We're not gonna do this anymore. This is the instantly solve this problem spell, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so and again, tinkering with that sort of like balance as well also alters a lot of like I guess kind of like the almost like the relations and what a wizard even is, right?
Yeah.
Because in the sort of the default assumption of AD&D, you can't just say, "Oh, there's a wizard there. Well, we're just gonna get like 60 tough guys, archers, and they're gonna fuck them up." No, the wizard has whatever protection from normal missiles uh, or
Mirror image, protection from normal missiles. Yeah.
cloud kill.
Uh,
Yeah, you name
yeah.
it, right? Yes,
Or well, invisibility. Like, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he has 15 different
Yeah.
possible countermeasures that he could use against your shenanigans, right? It's not so quite so simple. There's like this hard cutoff, just like dragons have like a it's fear effect that prevents you from screwing with them. So uh, you know, again, these are all things that you can tweak. You can add spells, all that stuff. But there's like a sort of there's I guess a sort of again, yeah, we come back to a hierarchy of like power, and too many changes will inevitably alter that. Um, and a little bit of alteration doesn't hurt that much, but too much, and the game becomes something becomes unrecognizable.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think. I'm partly thinking about there are a few versions of D&D because we're talking about AD&D here,
Yeah,
and kind of if you like the full thing that Gary envisions. But there's a few versions of the game we see around which are not contemptible, but which do obviously there's certain kind of natural lower limits than that, or things where within the design there's intentional limits, like Epic 6, which is originally a solution to third edition, but you do see in some people running old school games kind of roughly you get some extra stuff at every level after 6, but the point is the core level is essentially you get to 6th level, then you just get bonuses as you get more XP,
right.
or something like that. And the same with so don't obviously my sons both leveled up their first character for the first time ever at
In
the weekend.
Dulmenwood.
In
All right.
Dulmenwood.
They're now level
Yeah,
2, so they're
they're now
almost
level 2.
gods.
Yeah, there. But I'd say one thing you can see is Dawnwood is more resilient because it's introduced loads of advanced DNA. Is one thing. But the same problem remains theoretically that you're like, oh, there are some monsters which are like 18 or 20 HD and are like godlings, and your wizards are capping out at 6th level spells or whatever. Is this actually
Yep.
viable to do? And I think that's a fair question. There are some very powerful magic items in the game, but I think it's not a contemptible game at all. I've praised it obviously, but you can see you're like theoretically the ultimate end game could be quite hard to play using this rule set, because players will eventually just become like, well, they're being outpaced, or they are permanently outpaced by the biggest monsters that are there to fight. In a way, they're not in AD&D. In AD&D, you always ascend. Does that make sense?
It does definitely, and that's you know the same when really the same with like Seven Voyages of Zilarthan, which is really the
Mhm.
that's for like the it's not for theater kids, but it is for like people with an imagination. I think if you just sort of like breathe sword and sorcery, and you like to kind of like drift away um in ruminations or fantastic dreams of like other sword and sorcery worlds, and you just like to propel yourself into a place like that, then I feel Seven Voyages of Zilarthan basically just says like, okay, we're going to be more uncompromising with our faithfulness to sort of like the source material, and we're going to make
Yeah.
some changes to the game that I'm not sure if it would be a better, like pure gameplay wise, it's a better game, but it is a more sword and sorcery game,
Yeah.
right? So if you're looking for that, then this is gonna scratch that itch. And of course, yeah, divination. I'm not sure I don't think you might. Divination is to gauge the strength of an area. I think. I'm not sure if it allows you to find find out if a person is trying to murder you. This is going by
what
ancient
of course is
racial
that
memory, but
actually what happens? This is, and this can become comical in its own way and silly, but of course, presumably the point is that powerful wizards, proto liches, and arch, and those even greater liches, archdelves, etc., all essentially have non-detection, don't they? As in, the point is, you can't, your most powerful enemies, you cannot spam like that. You have to keep getting more powerful to deal with that problem.
Even worse, divination is not even a. I don't think it's. I think it's maybe a cleric spell. Fuck. All right. You contact outer planes. Yeah. Never mind. No, but so yeah, there's all sorts of ways kind of around it, but it is more to indicate like a general kind of a change in progression that that sort of forms a core assumption of like how the world works, at least.
I would say, of course, by the way, if you do have a spell or a magic item that lets you detect an enemy who does that, and then you can summon an invisible stalker, great, that's part of the power curve. You've become this kind of arch wizard yourself, and you think you're immune to stuff, and then suddenly you're like, no, you've started to annoy the I don't know, the powers of Bitopia. Think about the most obscure planes, but the idea that at that point, an avatar of a power is starting to send agents after you. You can't do that anymore. You can't invisible stalker him.
Although,
the threat still
being able to say, bring me the head of like of the Thurgar, bring me his head, and then it goes, and the thing like flies away and then returns. That's, I mean,
oh no, it's cool.
Can you just send invisible stalkers to just beat up a dungeon after you scry it, you pay some spies, there's
and I think that's a legitimate thing though, is that's part of the theoretical sense of kind of the power progression. Donwards plus 2 weapons. You can see random. You can see the some of the mathematical effects of that, for good or bad. The mathematical effects obviously even out over time. They become fairly trivial. What is weird is it means that if you just play strictly as written, it's a lot harder to granularly iterate. Mathematically, you have to just play. No, it's just plus 10% essentially. And that is strange, and I'm not sure. I suspect it's basically to simplify it. Essentially, means
the audience had too many problems with there being more than one type of bonus. There were very much
that will be it. It'll be like, people. You get lots of lists of stuff that are duplications, except for the percentage. That is not inherently a problem, but if you're simplifying stuff, but you're trying to have a bigger, you're trying to have a more complex list, or maybe you get rid of that because does it matter? And of course,
can see the Reddit sort of thread of like, I love Dolmenwood. It's the best setting. I just felt that like the old pluses, it was so clunky. Like it just you.
I was going to say, I doubt that's gone through Gavin's mind, but Gavin Norman. But I think absolutely there'll be some sense that when you're cutting chaff, exactly the kind of thing that plenty of people probably just don't care for is the ability to iterate
variation.
Your treasure. Variation in treasure. Pretty much.
All right.
Random also said that we're pedants, and he just means like augury or some kind of augury.
I mean, I don't mean to correct you. Of course, you could contact you could ask the planes themselves, which is of course also not without risk. And before you know it, you can. You got to be careful. If you use that too often, then like you basically you turn yourself into like a madman, and before you know it, you have like a deranged.
But that's cool. I think Random is in favor of that. I think he thinks that's cool. So So we're saying looking at the clerics. So clerics have first level. I would just do this as like each first level set. Bless, command, create water, cure light wounds, detect evil, detect magic, light, protection from evil, purify food and drink, remove fear, resist cold, and sanctuary. What problems in the world does this suggest that you're going to be facing? What things, how does the cleric contribute to that? How does the world get built around those spells, I guess, or what have you know?
Oh, geez.
Question.
Well, I mean, these are all fairly common threats, right? Like again,
Yeah.
the healing is just like in case you sort of like screw up to keep people going for a bit longer.
Yeah.
I it's the sanctuary. I kind of love it. It's or it's a lot of like protective spells, sanctuaries again to again also protect you, maybe allow you to be a little bit of like to do a little bit of scouting or to escape in an easy fashion. But uh yeah, um it does imply like a set of threats, I guess. But I was sidetracked a little bit by a more by when we talk about implied setting. Owen, do you in your setting do you use like the any sort of like uh, deities, and have you ever considered making the cleric kind of like sort of playing up all of the implied sort of like the biblical or Christian sort of like undertones of the clerical class? Do you ever use that, or do you go for like a Forgotten Realms / Greyhawk style pantheon?
I mean, yeah, it's funny because in Dolmenwood, it is the one game where, like, by the way, there is only one actual god in the set. This is the funniest thing about the controversies. Dolmenwood is the one game where there's like there is one actual god, all the rest are godlings, nothing else
But it's a
equates to god.
girl.
Yeah, well, it's not. It's not
Yeah.
even clear. But yeah, but there is a god, and it's plainly Christian.
Right.
That was something that was very slightly downplayed in the Kickstarter edition in terms of the, but it's still very obviously Christian. It's still very obviously Christian.
Very good. Yes.
Idos just gave the comment NB a lot, and then has apologized because he was cleaning his keyboard.
Okay, well,
Hey Ados,
it is what it is.
yeah, happens. Yeah, but so in that case, it's kind of a funny one because Gary obviously doesn't actually play up. There is a Christian cosmology at some level. By Christian, I mean a Dantean kind of quasi-medieval cosmology going on. There are planes. There's an ascent. There's and there are gods, but there's obviously some kind of like underlying. It's a thing where on the one hand there is a Christian cosmology, but on the other hand, there's a desire to distance from it without stepping on its toes. Hence why he doesn't put killable angels in his monster books. And I think that's
and there's
interesting.
Some Monster Manual too who did that, I think.
Yeah.
Was he against? What, did he do that? Did he not underwrite that?
I don't think he put. I don't. Are there any in MM2?
Solar, yeah. Solar.
Oh, it's the
maybe
Solar
even
in MM2. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's obviously not in MM1. Yeah.
No.
But yeah, it's something where you can see there's this desire to what's the word? A desire to kind of say, look, there is a holy power, like in fiction, that can get rid of undead and things like that. Remember, the cleric also has turn undead at first level.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's not actually explicitly playing with real life, inverted commas, theology, spirituality.
No,
I generally
not.
I tend to be happy with that. I actually think in some ways, like going the other way and being like, oh no, it's more explicitly Christian, raises different kinds of I don't know, questions about the logic of the world. But yeah, no, I tend to go for that Greyhawk Forgotten Realms thing. In Dawnwood, I'm fine with it being. I mean, I say as Random says, the saints are very important. It's a kind of very much the Puritine Church is very much a Catholic church and a medieval Catholic church of saints, shrines, and miracles and legends. And I mean, that kind of gives it the same distance.
You can have your cake and eat it too, right? Even if you postulate only one sort of deity, you can still have like a shit ton of saints and angels that people pray to. Like all that stuff. No, it's just something that it's like caught in the back of my mind because of like there's so many spells that are very clearly based on sort of like the works of like saints and prophets in the Bible. And so a very strong sort of like undercurrent there of
snake to
implied
sticks,
setting.
sticks to snake.
Classic, even the earthquakes, the various healing spells. It goes
Yeah,
I was actually reading the Bible or I have been reading it for quite a while, all the Old Testament stuff, and there's quite a lot of it is, of course, as a D&D fan, made me go, hey, wait a minute. Even what is it? When they blow the horns and they, the walls of
Jericho.
Jericho fell down. I was like, okay, horn of blasting. Now I see it, right?
Yeah.
Like that
I
sort
mean,
of
hey,
stuff. So
conjure animals. That's what Elisha did to those drunken teenagers who were abusing him. Conjured some
right,
bears.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or the insect swarm, like the 12 plagues of like
Yeah.
Moses, like that sort of stuff. Yeah, so there's a lot of it, like there's kind of like interesting implications there, as well as like with the cleric being able to turn, you can turn undead and you can turn demons, right?
Yeah.
But not especially evil men, and evil clerics can turn paladins and presumably maybe angels. So
Correct henchman.
if those exist. So
Mm.
that's also another, like, an interesting, I guess, sort of a question of like, what is it you're actually doing besides what does that represent besides the sort of the game mechanic of like being able to repulse them, and the sort of the classical um, Abraham Van Helsing vampire hunter, raising his cross and
Yeah.
repelling the undead creature.
Oh yeah. Turn undead is plainly Van Helsing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say. By the way, Dracula. What a good book. What a good book Dracula
Oh
is.
yeah. I've read it too.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the cleric suggests. I'm going to answer my own question next. I think you'd begun to answer it as well. The
Yeah.
cleric suggests it's interesting. It creates a mechanical design choice of a support / passive caster, because the
Right.
stuff is about mostly indirect. You get some direct stuff over time. You get, I've got a cool thing that is a bit more powerful, and that can affect
Mostly
the enemy.
against the interesting thing is mostly against like men and humanoids
Yeah,
who have the
yeah,
like powers like command.
mm,
I guess command is also another interesting one where it's it seems very strong, but then you have to speak the language of the creature you're commanding,
mm,
and there's a bunch of like caveats associated with that as well. You have
mm,
hold person, but not hold monster, I believe.
yeah.
Right,
Hold
all
person
that.
at second. Yeah,
Yeah, you get a bunch of counters, but it's very clearly that this is a secondary sort of like set of abilities. Your main role is protective rather than offensive, for sure.
yeah. Well, I think it's protective, supportive, but the point
Also
is, it's not.
preventive. Sorry,
Yeah, preventive. Yep, exactly. Resist fire. I think resist cold is a first level spell. Resist fire is
divination.
second level. Um, and yeah, you have at first level you have command and you have light, which can both be used aggressively, technically, but they don't do direct damage. You actually have to wait in terms of direct damage. You have to wait to something like, except against undead. I turn undead. Obviously, just starts destroying stuff. You have to wait to be 7th level, because
Nope.
9th level, sorry, to get flame strike
No,
and
but you get
insect plague.
spiritual hammer before that,
Oh
which
no,
is
but spiritual hammer with Shillelagh's parallel for druids is not direct. It's about like weapon bless being used to bless a weapon. It's about creating something that can damage the enemy, particularly magically protected enemies.
I feel
Yeah,
I mean, spiritual hammer
yeah.
has it's almost like a really like weak sauce Mordekainen's what do you call it,
Dancing sword, whatever.
yeah, Mordekainen's sword, or just sword as it's called in oh no, maybe it's called Mordekainen's sword, I don't know. But
Yeah.
right, it's a field of force, right? It's you don't
Mm.
even you can strike anything within range, so it's almost like
Yeah.
or it's like produce flame for the druid, where you can just
Yeah.
throw that stuff.
I
So
was going to
it's
say, and well,
yeah.
yeah, no, yeah, produce flame is a good spell as well, by the way. But no, I agree. But it's something where you can't really. It's not really the same. It's not a direct damage spell, because it's not I've got magic missile or I've got flame strike. It's I have an extra weapon. Essentially, it's the same thing as to say I have an extra weapon. So it's still a bit more indirect. But yeah, it does. Some of the stuff says, look, there's going to be stuff that can make you scared and run away. So there's magical fear. There's cold, like the idea that,
Oh
and
yeah, like that.
there's detect and protection from evil. Create water and purify food and drink. Obviously, both indicate the idea, and this is obviously an underrated. Create water can be used aggressively as well, of course, as in creatively. But they both suggest that survival might be a problem out in the wilderness. There might be things that are wrong, or there might be things that might happen to your food or whatever else. This isn't stuff we necessarily leverage very much, and maybe some people wouldn't find it interesting, but it does suggest this kind of a world where scarcity of good food and drink is a thing. And
It
that's a threat you
suggests
can
it,
throw
although
against the
this is
player.
not. So it's there, but this is one area where because the rest of the DMG and the game doesn't really have rules for like anything like starvation.
Yeah.
In practice, I mean, purify food and water. Uh, you're maybe gonna use it if you suspect something is poisoned. I guess this is a very I almost it's almost like when I look at a spell, I try to like sort of like I try to rate how often you would be using it, and this is like a tricks only kind of like Hail Mary type of spell. Maybe you run into a water weird every once in a while, but like bringing purify food and water when you've only got a couple of slots, and the rest of the players are going to go, why aren't you bringing a cure light
Yeah.
wounds to the dungeon? No,
I
I'm
would
bringing
say I'm
purify food
I'm
and
partly
water, right?
thinking it's a third level spell, but create food and water. I
Oh,
see
sorry, purify. Yeah,
create food and water.
that's
I know
different.
as I know. First of all, we were talking about purify food and drink. To be clear,
Yeah.
what I'm saying is create food and water. I do see come up
Oh yeah.
in Wilderness Trek because
Sure.
it obviates, and the same with Goodbury and stuff like that. I have I created this is I think it's quite a cool magic item. I created a medium shield +1 with the ability to cast Good Brew 1 a day. So which a fighter in the open table game we play every other Sunday has that he found ages ago. And yeah, which is a good item, medium shield +1, that's good. But also it means he can either feed or heal once a day. But something that those spells, Good Brew and create food and water, kind of aren't very useful. Goodbury can heal, which is useful, but they're not very useful most of the time. Like they're not like in the dungeon, but they might be, but not usually. But they're going to be useful if you employ the other parts of the game. And again, there's an implied setting thing there of the game is going to include traveling long distances
Survival and
and
wilderness travel. Yeah,
survival.
I
Yeah,
can see that. Yeah,
and
that's
if
true.
you and I play a lot of that, and not everyone's going to enjoy that, and that's fine. But it's one of those things. It'd be odd to be like, no, D&D doesn't actually include that. That's fake. That doesn't exist. Well, it does exist. It's there in the rules, but also you just play the game and it's there. You read the rules as written, and it's there. And suddenly those rules have benefit. I'd say in that case, purify food and drink could definitely help in a. I'm thinking about a game setting like Dark Sun where you might not be able to get good food, things like that. Suddenly, that as a first level spell
Yeah,
becomes
so
more
I'm far more
leverage.
positive about like
Yeah,
create food and water for the
yeah.
reasons you
Then purify
outlined,
food and
because
drink. Yeah.
the DM can just employ some sort of arbitrary penalty. That's true. But like for purify food and water, this is like such you have to like get into this situation. Maybe if you're in a desert, I guess, and you would you run into like there's already you already have to start thinking about like, well, it really depends on like how how the individual DM adjudicates all of this stuff. You have to find water. Okay, how do you do that? And then like maybe a percentage chance that it's like, maybe it's salt water or something like that. So there's this feels very it's either niche, or it really depends on like the DM doing a lot of like heavy lifting to sort of get you to use it. So the degree to which the need for it arises naturally from the framework that's already pre-existing is low compared to something like cure light wounds, which you carry always,
Yeah.
augury,
Yeah.
like all the fine traps.
Yeah. I mean, it is perfectly possible, indeed it will be the case in some cases, that stuff that makes it into AD&D, even into core parts of AD&D, was not that important theoretically. There are some things in AD&D which you can tell were ancillary,
Right.
and there are some, but in this case I'm just thinking, like obviously rations exist, and the idea that players, an interesting thing which shows, and it's not a hard system to fix or add in, to be clear,
No.
but it's something where you can see that Gary thinks that people should have to worry about carrying stuff, and they, to some kind of limited degree, encumbrance matters, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
they should worry about feeding and having food. And I think obviously there's an implication that if people don't have food, that would be bad. but it's something which he doesn't really mechanize, and that may indicate something about how his campaigns worked. Think about how much his core campaigns worked around the city of Greyhawk, particularly for a long time. And that suggests that it wasn't as important to him, that kind of long distance travel. When people were doing that, they were high level, so maybe it wasn't as much of a
Well,
problem.
I think it may also be the case that he put more value, maybe he attached more value to the idea of like you consuming resources as you adventure, rather than, you know, sort of uh this game where it's like this survivalist hell, right? It's almost
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the assumption
His
is just
concern,
like,
that is not his
yeah,
concern. His concern is not, my word, you have to like perfectly balance your entire budget and your entire. And of course, there could be fun to that. I know it's something that in our Dark Sun campaign, people like the couple of guys who were involved in running the caravan did enjoy working that out. That was like, oh yeah, that's a fun thing. But the point is, it wasn't. It was that was in a particular case where survival really mattered. But obviously, normally that's not core to the setting. Is the idea that you literally are going to die. You know,
right,
you leave town and you just drop dead because it's so lethal.
you die of dysentery. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
right.
There
So
is a chance. Hey, he says there are discretionary points where you need to do your 5% check per month if you're in a particularly
for the
insalubrious environment.
diseases, yeah, of
Yeah, yeah.
course.
So that's the thing he did put effort into, Prince. You're saying
No, no, no,
dysentery is a
no.
bad
I mean,
example.
that would be fine. We're
Yeah, yeah,
getting into
yeah.
we're definitely getting into the questions, but I just want to say that like I think the default assumption is more that like, you know,
Mm,
it's something it's like light sources where you don't, if you prepare properly, so if you have reasonable resources, it's more like it's a logistical challenge to make sure you don't run out. That sort of puts natural like
mm,
boundaries on what you can do versus,
yeah.
and I'm not saying that these are like large boundaries. Obviously you can
Mm,
easily afford like however many I think, what is it, the iron rations stay well for over a week in the dungeon and a month outside, and that should sort of
yeah.
tell you how long you'd be able to like
Yeah.
travel. um
So there's a funny way in which, yeah,
yeah,
almost there might be a more elegant, if that is the entire purpose of that bit of the implied setting based on the rules existing,
not the
that
entire
that
purpose, but like I feel
well, or a
that's
significant
more as a higher
purpose.
weight than
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
you know, you run out and what to do. It's like, well, you know, you run out of light. What do? You cry. You get the fuck back to the
yeah.
entrance.
Oh no,
It's
yeah, no,
yeah,
I agree. But by saying that, probably that would be an argument for you could probably elegantly distill that. That might be something that if you really want to press on that, but in the direction that seems implied by the rules, you could. That's a distillation that potentially is there to be made.
yeah,
Potentially. I think there's lots. I'd say, given the number of very easy solutions there are out there to giving penalties for running out of food and water, that kind of thing, it should. I would say water. My general stance, of course, to state the obvious, is in the wilderness, unless you're in the desert, you can always find water. That's not
yeah.
because
That's a
that's
general
true.
sort of
Yeah, but yeah,
idea, but
indeed.
like and then when you're in the desert, then again it's going to be really good. And yeah, like
Mm,
I can imagine some sort of like, again, this is, you really have to, if the DM puts his shoulders in there and it's going to go like,
mm,
okay, you find water here, here, and here, but like these wells are poisoned, there's a dead animal in here, or like the
yeah.
whatever the
So yeah,
sandorks you've been
that's the
fighting
other
with are,
direction. One
you know,
direction
yeah,
is the DM needs to distill down the mechanical requirement and limit based on you need to this much weight is required of you, and this
right,
is your general range. The other
yes,
option is to say this is an opportunity for the DM to push out and add a simple rule and the extra rule, and then add in obstacles like the well is poisoned. This well is poisoned, but you can travel this far to get to the river. But that is an extra encounter roll,
that
as an
is
example.
true, in the same way that you know, you can tell encumbrance definitely is meant to like matter because there's a
Mm,
whole spell that allows you to circumvent it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's a
Yeah,
Tensor's floating disk. It
yeah, and that which is a first level spell. We haven't done the wizard list as a whole, but obviously you could sum up the
no,
wizard list in those two ways. One is direct damage, and the other is non-protective utility. And one of those examples of non-protective utility is Tensor's floating disk.
yeah,
Um,
there.
yeah,
I had an early concept for a nap. I ended up not doing it because I figured that like how to grading it would be very difficult, and I feel it would be too, like I felt it would be too goofy. But my idea was essentially that you had to make a dungeon that, you know, every single spell in the um, on the wizard list needed to be used somewhere, because basically my gripe was that I see most people kind of gravitate towards the sort of like standard high value obvious choices like a sleep charm person, maybe magic missile, that sort of stuff. And I don't see enough people carrying mending or Tensor's floating disk or Nistel's magical aura. So I was like, well, it's up to you, gang. Make a dungeon that incentivizes people to say, pick ESP instead of invisibility, and not get yelled at by the rest of the party because you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
And that
Oh no,
really
I
comes
think
down to
so,
DM
and it
skill.
is
Yeah.
satisfying. It is satisfying to see players like those other spells. I would say, just to say, there are examples of spells you shouldn't take into the dungeon, and they're not really there for you to like. Identify is not a spell for first level or second level wizard to take into the dungeon. It's not meant for that. It's meant to be
No, it's
a
only good if you take it into the dungeon. It doesn't
no.
work otherwise. You have to
Oh
cast
no.
it within an hour per level of like finding the item. There's all these bullshit caveats. You have to cast it in the dungeon. You're not going to get away with it. At lower levels, it's a garbage spell at lower levels, but it has all these
Well,
caveats.
saying
But you,
so, yeah. So it's not something you want to first or second level a guy take
uh,
into the dungeon.
I think it's what is it? You get like it costs, first of all, it costs 100 GP, so it's not cheap. And you have to eat a fish or something like that. But what is it? A number of segments, and then a percentage chance based on your, what is it, your level and your intelligence or something like that. In the beginning, it's kind of wonky, but at some point, identify becomes worth it. But yeah, no, it's you definitely do. I actually think it's well designed, despite all of those crap caveats, because it would be a shit spell if you it, if you could just do it during your downtime. Then it's a no-brainer, basically. Then it's like you always take it. You always, oh, during downtime, bam, 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 bam. It's a binary ability. But the way he's written it in 1E is he's
Yeah, no, I'm reading it. The item to be identified must be examined by the magic user within 1 hour per level of
yeah,
experience with the examiner
yeah,
after it's been discovered. Or all readable
correct.
impressions have been blended into those of the characters who possessed it since. Yep.
Yes.
That's obviously something that changes, but yes.
The idea is you sacrifice capacity, right? That's the whole thing. So it's a good spell because of that reason. Now,
well, I mean, you lose 8 points of constitution temporarily, so you still,
yeah.
yeah.
It's a
So
huge risk.
still, yeah.
Yeah. But it's actually well designed, despite all those. Like, people complain about it, but it's still worth it.
I don't think
Knowing
it's
what
I
an
don't think it's
item
bad.
does.
Obviously, as I say, I'm usually using a slightly altered version of that,
Right.
rulebook wise. But
Right.
the yeah, no, there's nothing wrong with that. It's I think a big thing is the idea that if you think when you are high enough level that it's going to be 15% plus 5% per level for each segment or whatever,
Yeah.
if you are high enough level that's going to be advantageous, and your party can protect you, and you've got Layman's tiny hut or something, that kind of thing, then actually it's fine. You just say, look, let's sort this out. Let's wait. Let's protect the wizard while he does this, the magic user while he does this.
And then you can instantly use you can discern I'm not sure, I'm trying to recall if you could discern a command word, probably, like imagine you find a staff of wizardry, and you can instantly pop it out instead of having to like trudge back to town, and then you have to go through like whatever tedious annoying process you have to do to like figure out how to use it, because the DM is a big meanie.
Yeah.
Right.
The solution, my rule, I'm sure you have the same, is if essentially call it attunement if you want. If you start using it, you find out what
Yeah.
it does. You don't screw players by being like, oh no, you've actually got to experiment in that's obviously one of those false OSRisms, or OSR falsisms, let's call it, of like, that would be more fun. You're like, well, it might be more fun for an improv group, but not really for a D&D group, because the D&D group wants to go and explore an adventure, and there's no mechanic other than the player using the right words to get the DM to tell them the thing isn't a fun part of the game, basically.
It can be, I think it can be interesting to sort of like figure out like if it's like a sort of puzzle. You can't, uh, you kind of have to look at like, okay, I've got a bunch of clues. Okay, what could it be, right? And then maybe the command word is located somewhere in the dungeon. Maybe you discern something of its origins, and you start to experiment. And if all else fails, you go to a sage, right? You just you
Yeah.
bite your teeth, you fork over
You
the
pay
shit
the
ton of
money, and it's
money.
and
Yeah,
that is a version, of course, of paying for identify, isn't it? If
yeah.
which doesn't necessarily give that information, but it's the equivalent of paying for identify to be like, can you tell me how to make this work? Yeah.
It,
Um,
it's actually
I
interesting
could,
that it. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, go for it.
Well, when we speak about implied setting, I so many people, especially who play OD&D, have the house rule that you pay $100, and the identifying man, he just this whatever the local sage says, yeah, this is a wand of fireballs, you can use it like
Yeah.
this, and then okay, thanks a lot, man. All right, and then it's sort of just like you take it all to the guy. He tells you what it is, and then you get back in the dungeon. I get right back into it, and in AD&D, they actually made it much harder. Like the sages are
Mm.
incredibly expensive, and you can get
Yeah, yeah,
screwed
they are.
on the if you ask questions outside of domain and all this stuff, right?
Mm. I do enjoy. I've got 8th level characters who are like, fine, we will just pay a save for something because they have the
Yeah.
money, and that's kind of a fun kind of pyramidal thing in the
Oh
game
yeah.
to be like, they're like, no, fine, we will just it is easier for us to just spend these thousands of gold than to not know what to do about this particular problem or
Oh yeah.
whatever the question is. Yeah.
No,
Uh,
I think that's also reasonable, right? It's and it's again also in the spirit of the game is that you
mm,
either, you this is like a good example of like where it's almost like a puzzle, right? Like
mhm.
but it's one you're allowed to circumvent if you spend the resources
Oh
otherwise.
yeah, yeah. Would
Yeah.
you rather go into their kind of their ethereal tower and sneak in and work out all the information via going into the deep pits of the ethereal tower and talking to the slave underfolk, the subhumans, and work
Yeah.
out the secret, or would you rather pay? And both those, one of them could be fun, but it might also be something you're like, I don't really want to do that. I just want to go and fight the guy. Or you could be like, we'll find out the secret by asking a sage who has studied this area. You know.
Yeah, or
Uh,
it's even like and in this case it is use the right words, but it's not that it's not always bad in the sense that the player asks a very insightful question that like he would know,
mm,
like okay, he discerns that like the the iconography on the
mm,
staff pertains to a certain deity, and then
yeah.
okay, like from there he goes like okay, I start
Yeah.
whatever. Um,
The way
it,
to
yeah,
remove the say certain words thing is to say, okay, the point is that actually it's an operative command rather than a persuasion check on the DM. It's saying we have this staff and we want to know about it. Okay, yes, there will be a sage in the big city who knows about magic items, whatever.
yeah,
And this is the mechanic. The way you circumvent it all becomes a weird social thing. Is you just say this is the mechanic, and that is the thing.
y-
Obviously, this is not
yeah.
on the implied setting, but that's a table habit of like if your players say, "What about this?" You say, "Nope, that is the rule." Like there's a degree to which you say, "This is just the way this works,"
Oh
so that
yeah,
we don't
yeah, yeah,
spend
yeah.
time with
Uh,
you trying to
I,
tell me, get me to do what you want. You know.
well, I think that these things can or are even meant to exist sort of like side by side, right? In a sort of joyous
Mm.
harmony of
Yeah.
occasionally it's like something where by investigating closely or paying close attention or being sharp, you can kind of shortcut the sort of
Oh yeah.
the Gygaxian troll toll, and if not, it's off to the sage as we go, boys.
Oh no,
Um,
I think asking
yeah,
questions is different, to be clear, as in saying, oh, I look at, I look and does the room have any of this? And you say, yes, it does.
yeah.
Again, be generous with that. I would say my general view is just generosity on these things, but simplicity of mechanic in terms of you just say that you ask this, like, don't be like, oh, you find a secret door. How are you going to find out its mechanism? I think more or less that with something like that is something where you should say generally just you found the secret door, you can open it, rather than like creating a continued word game. But when it's
Well,
something like, oh, I wonder if this would interact with this. That's an interesting question for me.
with this your secret door example is a good example where so you have a situation that happens a million times, right? And it's I'm also of the opinion that like say when you search a room, I don't make them go through like, well, I check the table leg, I tap the table
Yeah,
leg, I
yeah.
turn it over, I see if there's a different weight. At some point, all
You
of
just
that
let
gets
them know. Yeah,
abstracted, right? And in some
yeah,
cases, you'll ask when it's relevant, you'll ask, how they go about searching. But in
yeah,
many cases, when they say I search a room, you like they're gonna turn that. You ask how long do you search, and they
yeah.
they
That's the
they turn
question.
it upside
No,
down.
the
Yeah,
the point there is time. Unless there's a
yeah,
different thing for me, which is um that if something is set up as a puzzle, we're not going to discuss the validity of puzzle gaming here. But if it's a
right,
puzzle, fine, it's a puzzle, right? You just do the
sure,
puzzle. But if it's not
yeah,
a puzzle, then I think abstracting it into time cost and the players saying, "Look, we searched thoroughly." My players will literally say, "We searched thoroughly. Obviously, check if there's a secret compartment, whatever." Like
yeah.
that, it takes that long on the voice chat, and then I say, "Okay, in that case, that's
That's
going to be an
perfect. Yeah,
extra. That's an
correct.
extra encounter check. That's an extra wandering monster check."
Yeah.
Because you've spent the time. But that's fine. You will get the results of that. I won't be like, oh, which things do you tap?
Well,
Like in
yeah,
some
because
absurd,
that's
like, let's spend more
the
time talking about it.
yeah the sort of the gains are not you may in
Proportional.
some cases have something interesting where you kind of
Mm,
like you think maybe I'll get the players, they'll come up, I'll hide it really cleverly, and they too have
mm,
to consider all these clever ways in which an object could have been hidden. But the reality is that actually you end up um burning a lot of real game session time that you can also be
yeah,
spending differently for little. It's all about bang for your buck, and this is just not enough
yeah.
bang for your buck. Okay,
Um,
that was a bit of
we'll
an
quick,
aside, I think.
yeah. We'll quickly say henchman. Yes, I would say that cause light wounds is a neutral or evil. I think I might have allowed some neutral. Depends on the god as well. Um,
And I believe random said casting finger of death on a marauding troll. Did
Oh,
they
you keep evil priests around because they cast Finger of Death, was his point.
I, have they kept like I remember at some point finger of death migrated from the uh clerical spell list to the wizard spell list.
Yeah, maybe.
It's slay living now for
Mm,
clerics. Oh, sorry, this is also an aside. Never mind, continue.
yeah. Sage, we have a compounding 1 in 6 chance to figure it out each week study. You pay every week. 1 in 20 each week. Yeah, I mean, that's fun, isn't it? Um, you don't want to do that too often, though, random. If they know it's a 1 in 20 chance every time, they're going to skip.
The druid death
So,
spell, yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Oh, Finger of
Wasn't
Death
it
was a good
like
death spell. Never felt
in
cool.
zero in OE in LBB? Wasn't it Finger of Death? It doesn't matter. Never mind. This is a trivial point. Moving on.
Finger of Death is a 7th level druid spell. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I was going to say the druid at first level. We've talked about the magic user a bit. I'd say it is interesting. You have some funny stuff on there as well. Like protection from evil is so important. It is first level for both MUs and clerics, which I think is interesting. Is something where the assumption that you might need some debuff on the enemy, not buff for you, but debuff on the enemy, it follows across, despite the fact that doesn't match the general magic user logic. Of kind of either flashy spells to do something or non-protective utility. Yeah, druids have, I think, it's interesting. Animal friendship, detect magic, detect snares and pits, entangle fairy fire, invisibility to animals, locate animals, pass without trace, predict weather, purify water, shillelagh, and speak with animals. So this is not a class at first and second level that is going to be enormously enjoyable if you're only ever in the dungeon, is it?
Well, I was going to say, and I see that Ados looked it up. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
thanks,
was
Ados. Good
originally
man.
for evil clerics. That's what I thought. But no,
Which is
so you
that's
might think
random's reference,
locate
yeah.
you, Owen. You might think locate animals. Why the fuck are we using that? Or predict weather. You're gonna use it. Like if you're
Yeah,
maybe not at
yeah.
first level, but like if you have a druid player, okay, just wait until call lightning. Until they get call lightning, and then you get that immortal question of like, well, I cast predict weather, DM. What weather is it going to be? And I go, fuck. Okay, I don't have a system for this shit. And then you page through Greyhawk, like finding these ridiculously ornate weather tables. So you can at least give him like some probability of like, okay, on these days it's going to be cloudy and
All I'm
humid
saying
enough
is
for you to
I
use cow
use those
lightning.
tables. I
Yeah,
use the Greyhawk
yeah,
tables.
no, of
Just to be clear.
course, and locate animal.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, because at some point you get I believe it's call animals or yeah, it's summon animals like that. Only you don't summon monster. It's literally okay. A big purple smoke cloud appears and the monsters step forth from some sort of non-space,
Yeah.
right? Not call
Yeah.
animal. They have to
Yeah.
show
I
up
know. I
and
know.
be in the region,
Cool with them
right?
beings, whatever. Yeah.
So
No.
locate
No. I
animal,
agree.
or if
I agree.
you want to use animal friendship, right?
Yeah.
How do you find those damn things? Well, yeah, you
Yeah.
get locate animal.
I'd say.
So
Well,
you know,
I would say it's also that. I mean, certainly animal friendship is also something you can just sometimes also use to negate and obviate wilderness encounters and dungeon encounters. Purify
I would.
water again falls into the same thing we already said. Shillelagh is again a soft combat spell, like as in it buffs your ability to do combat, it doesn't do direct damage.
Yeah, well, so yeah, Shillelagh, it's sort of
Like
again
spiritual hammer.
these are yeah, like the druid more so than the cleric, but even the druid is definitely not combat is definitely or damage output is definitely a secondary uh
Yeah,
ability. Yeah,
there's spells that give that character an extra optional thing they can do that helps essentially, and including potentially bypassing magic in some cases. Yeah, Henchman says animal friendship gives me cancer. I'm sorry,
well,
man.
first of all, finger of death, reverse of raise dead is slay living, my friend.
Yeah, slay living.
But animal friendship is obviously very good. Always use.
Henchman
Just
hates it, but yeah.
that's something for the druid to do during your downtime, right? That
Yeah,
I mean, I've had
yeah,
that where he goes like, "Well,
yeah.
geez, I go outside. Okay, what kind of animals can I find? I mean,
I
you've
need to
got to
get some.
locate
Yeah,
animals."
I
Cool.
suppose
Yeah,
that's one thing is the idea the druid should be in that sense like a kind of a summoner in small less summoner, like a guy who brings a bunch of little guys to battle.
yeah.
Is not or in utility. And I'd say pass without trace useful, useful spell. So, but again, it detects snares and pits as well. Detect snares and pits is obviously a subspecies or alternate to detect traps, which and I think which is a find traps
Considerably
is
less
cleric second
powerful,
level.
but yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
but it's
That's one where
first level rather than second level.
yeah.
And I think that's a kind of and I would say I've seen druids use that. I think it's because in the Greyhawk game, one of my wife's characters is a druid who might be, I'm not sure if she's 5th or 4th level now, but yeah, like has a druid who's succeeded and got on with life, and occasionally detect snares and pits comes out. I think it's something which sometimes it can feel like there's other stuff that is it depends on how, like she has low whiz comparatively, so I think the lack of bonus spells means that there's a bit more like, well, what do you want me to bring? But she has used detect snares and pits.
Random is gaslighting us with Slay being
Yeah,
reversed
Slay's
heal.
reversed
Its
heal, my
harm
friend.
is reversed heal, my friend. Okay, none of that. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this sounds like Henchman has personal experience of using animal friendship and being so upset by its results that he is going on the internet and harassing innocent YouTubers about animal
Can't you?
friendship.
I mean, you would distract the rest of the wolves
Yeah,
obviously with rations, and then while
yeah,
they're
and
devouring
yeah,
that, and you're running away. You know,
yeah,
you're animal friendshipping one, and
yeah,
you can
yeah,
find some or whatever. You dig a pit, right? You dig a pit, and the wolf falls in, and then you animal friendship it, and you say,
yeah.
hello, friend. I'll
As I
let you
say
out of
again,
this pit.
animal friendship. I've both had animal friendship and
Yeah.
the. This is actually, I was going to say, I was about. There is actually something similar in one of the World of Greyhawk gods, but it's actually not a first edition, as that's a first edition priest power. But in yeah, one of my I have a priest of Lurg who has like a mundane animals won't attack him unless he attacks them, unless they're magically affected. So that's like a super animal friendship effect.
Oh yeah, that's very
They
good.
will attack they will attack everyone else. So it's not like, oh, that solves it. But it does mean if they spot animals, he will often from a distance, and for instance, there's no surprise, and they're like 200 feet away, then he can go forward and do stuff. So it somewhat depends on other factors, doesn't it? The same as if you had a magical item that did that. Illusionists, we'll quickly finish this because we have about 10 minutes. We have about 8 minutes, I guess, before we log off. I think tonight, is that right, Prince? About 8 minutes, 10 minutes?
That's on me. Yes, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Early finish
No,
tonight.
well, illusionists, I guess also, this is another, like another question of like the implied setting of like that there's these different sort of schools of magic that are really fundamental, and in 2E the difference is much less pronounced, and an illusionist is just like a sort of a nerd, a specialty nerd wizard that can do a couple of schools.
Sort of, as in, yes, I agree and I disagree, just based on experience of what you find is that spec wizards, because of how they have to pick spells and what they're not allowed to have, you sometimes are like, oh man, this illusionist is so good at this but so bad at this, is a real thing.
It does,
but it's not as pronounced in terms of spell choice. I agree, it's not like they don't have different lists. The same feeling of massive difference does come up, but not based on the fact they don't have the same spell list. Here it is that literally at first level they do not have the same spell list.
Like, no, exactly. And that's,
which is cool. I like it. It's fun.
Yeah, it really is an interesting class. I mean, let's not get into how illusions are defined, obviously, or how that works. But it is real. Like I feel so much more is like context sensitive with the illusionist, and you kind of have to, you in your mental mind have to. You're sort of stimulated to interact with the setting of the DM, because so many of your spells are effective based on the perception of the NPC. So you have to understand or have to be able to transport yourself into like what that NPC would think. It's actually a really interesting way of kind of like incentivizing the player to sort of to interact with the world in a way that's not
indeed. And
straightforward.
though that has fragilities, how far does that become drama school? How far is it that if you don't like that part of the game, which is not illegitimate, I'm mostly on that side, it becomes harder to do because you're not sure how to represent you don't have a theory of mind for the NPCs, let's put it that way.
Right.
But I think, I would say, I think there's stuff here which...
it's for the power gamer theater kids, yeah.
I would say, based on how I run the game, Detect Illusion and Detect Invisibility are interesting as first level powers. So the illusionist has Audible Glamour, Change Self, Color Spray. Color Spray is a very good offensive spell. Dancing Lights, Darkness, Detect Illusion, Detect Invisibility, Gaze Reflection, Hypnotism, Light, Phantasmal Force, excellent spell. Wall of Fog, excellent spell. They have arguably like one of the highest bang for buck spell lists, I think, at first level. Just because, that is so good.
And UA makes them even tougher. I think that even a Chromatic Orb probably is one where at level 1 it's quite bad, and you need to like start throwing gemstones. But I remember like at 9th level or something, even though it's 2 saves, it is a save versus death. You are throwing like death projectiles. It's just that's cool as hell.
But I was going to say Detect Illusion, Detect Invisibility, and they have Detect Magic at 2nd level. The way I run Detect Magic is a clutch spell in my players find, because I Detect Magic, I allow to detect basically non-illusion magic / non-invisibility magic, because invisibility is in 2E, it's an illusion phantasm, so it's the same thing. But so it's something where if a door has a magic missile trap on it, you don't know that it's a magic missile trap. You know there's magic there. Equally, if it's wizard locked, equally is a way of finding out if And this is good, and this is a really good spell.
The strength of the Dweomer, though, often forgotten.
You can. It's the same. It's the same. Which is really good. But Detect Illusion, of course, gives a different ability, which is that it allows you to find something which otherwise I don't allow Detect Magic to find. So it is something where there is a use case for that, which gives that the niche for that. I think also the idea that there's, apart from Color Spray, they're flashy effects in terms of they have a dramatic effect. I mean, that is to say, but they are not, generally speaking, direct. There's a question about Phant Force and theoretical damage done by phantasmal arrows, which can, though that's actually is that imp Phant Force maybe. Ignoring adjudication of illusory effects, they're all flashy, but they're not about you just blowing people up. Apart from Color Spray, they are about trickery and about creating space for you. like in terms of their, and that does suggest there are, as you say, there are NPCs who will react to that. That does challenge the DM. The DM has to have intelligent and therefore also stupid NPCs, like NPCs who react based on, oh, the troll wouldn't understand that this was a trick, but the mind flayer might. You know, the mind flayer might. That doesn't seem very
almost
convincing.
certainly, right?
Yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
18
absolutely.
int immunity to, or is that 19 int that you're immune to first
19
level
int, I think.
illusions?
Yeah,
Is that 19 int?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'd have to check
Anyway,
the thing.
yeah, like
Yeah,
just a
you talk.
genius would immediately go like, "Hey, wait a minute, something's off." Yeah. So you'd
But yeah,
better
I
have
think that
something
that's
very
something
good.
which again indicates there are things in the world which the game can do, and that if you remove, that's one thing. Your particular thing at the top of the show was if you remove these things, and this is Gary saying, look, there is flexibility. You should customize it. You should do what you want. I can't tell you what to include, but the things that are here for a reason. That's his argument, and I think that's the thing here is that if you say, well, I don't like these spells because illusions are hard to adjudicate. That is not an uncommon opinion. I've read that opinion. You've read that opinion. I don't like illusions. Well, in that case, you have to remove the idea that there is an interaction between the player and the NPCs in that sort of, and that's, I don't know, cat and mouse way. That idea that there might be a non-combat solution via magic in that way. You have to
Even
remove
during
it.
combat, you're still
Yeah. Oh no,
using
Oh no,
trickery.
yeah,
Yeah, you're still playing
but
the
say
same game.
I'm
Yeah,
actually,
I know
yeah,
what you're
no, I
saying.
agree.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
Wall of Fog is an example being a way to escape from combat is an archetypal thing. Yeah. I'm just we've got a good EOTB comment here. I'll pop it up. Illusion is really like the midwit bell curve. Dumb stuff with great senses are ready taken in. Yep. Experienced smart people already taken in. The guy who's read a book and thinks he's smart is toast. We talked about this before the show, actually. Didn't we, Prince? Someone stuck in the SD.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I think I have adjudicated. I think it's that I've adjudicated, and I think actually we spoke about this at the time. I did adjudicate an Iron Cobra would be convinced by an improved phantasmal force of being back in its container because it's a trigger, a visual trigger that it understands. But an Iron Cobra presumably would not be like, I see this is this kind of scene, and there are elves, and the elves therefore are immune to this, or something like, they're immune to ghoul paralysis. Of course, something that is very nearly mindless is not going to understand anything other than a trigger, and stuff that is absolutely mindless, like as in is just a machine, won't understand anything.
I feel constructs would
Yeah.
be the most almost susceptible to illusions, I guess, because they're
It depends on the construct, but yeah.
Yeah, right. That's like I feel one where
Agree,
you have no sort of like theory of mind or intelligence or consistency. You just kind of like respond to what is happening and you're executing programming.
In fact,
right?
that the only is an actual machine is more immune. The actual machine is just better at resisting the illusion because it doesn't even see it. Whereas the Iron Cobra, it's like, great, I'm in a box again. This is a thing the players did. They were like, the witch was like, can I use an imp Phant Force? Or it might have just been a Phant Force on the Iron Cobra to make it think it's back in the treasure chest. And I was like, yeah, that's
okay, sure. Yeah.
And I thought it made sense.
Well,
I thought it made sense. Yeah. But as I say, there are other things where I would say, on the other hand, saying a classic thing that the witch loves to when seeing an intelligent enemy and they've got distance and they're hidden or anything, being like, can I do an imp Phant Force of like whatever the square footage is, like 30 soldiers come out of the wood opposite and head towards the orc camp, but slowly, so they're not breaking the chance of, they're not going to be detected. But that won't work on the Iron Cobra because the Iron Cobra will be like, great, I should attack that.
I should attack that immediately. Yeah. That. Yeah.
So the thing is, and that is the thing where maybe this is the one thing we're talking about. You don't want to have a situation where it is the player needs to trick the DM by saying the right words into letting them win. Illusionists can come close there because you could imagine that a DM might be prone to always just like, sure, that is a good idea. But there is a thing where like that does require maybe this is your bell curve thing in a different way, but there is a way in which that does require some degree of elite skill to be able to not turn it into a bardic competition of who can come up with the best creation.
Well, it's about the level of precision that the DM requires in the instructions, right? And that's you keep saying like, what is it? Say the right thing and the DM will give it to you. But there is a legitimate sort of dimension in between. Like there's two fail states on either side. Like, And in the one hand, it's like the DM has to be, it's like constantly going like, I didn't say it exactly, right? And that's fucking annoying, right? Because this is really usually the at some point maybe this person is simply less precise. So you're basically demanding constant cognitive effort from this person, and
I think
otherwise
it's
you're
that
going to trip them up.
there's a
Right?
balance there, and it should be
Yeah,
that essentially, as a DM, probably it's partly a design question. We'll finish in a moment.
yeah.
This is definitely worth returning to, by the way. I think, Prince.
Yeah,
You
and then
probably agree.
yeah,
We should
on the
definitely come
other
back to
hand,
this.
it's just I think I had one of my players once
Yeah.
told me this of like, yeah, I want to do this. I was like, yeah, okay, but how do you do that? He's like, I don't know, bullshit. You make it happen. I do something. Like, and it's like,
Exactly. I think that's the thing is that
you do need to
they don't know the
do
game.
something. There is like a level of precision that is like
Yeah. There is
required,
this. It's
obviously.
about system. It's about system
Yeah,
expertise in the sense of becoming good at the game. I'd say
yeah,
it's a design problem because, as it's a design problem, the DM is the DM needs to be able to know roughly. And I know you won't be able to do this the first time you design an adventure and you have an illusionist play it, but you have to learn how are the kind of the monsters and other things and friendly NPCs or whatever that I'm putting in going to react to various things,
yeah,
and what triggers will I allow and which won't I, and that needs to be fairly consistent and in a sense open. I don't mean you tell the players. What I mean is it needs to be something the players can intuit rather than it's this crazy thing deep inside the DM's mind the players can never guess. It has to be logical, consistent, fairly open, and you have to kind of have some sense of it beforehand. If that's the case, when the player says, I cast Phant Force and I try to make sure the Iron Cobra is in a box, okay, that works, but I cast Phant Force, but I have orcs attacking it. That works less well.
yeah.
Like you need to know that beforehand, in a sense. I know I'm kind of proving that it's impossible because I didn't know beforehand. I had to make a judgment, but that's about the process of becoming better at being a DM, and having a better sense of it. I was gonna we'll end up because we should finish in a second. As I say, we should definitely come back to this subject because we've not at all plumbed this. I think. I don't know if you disagree. But I don't think we've. I will probably turn this into the implied setting part 1. I think. But yeah, Jonathan did say earlier the implied setting of 5e is not the implied setting of D&D. He is terrified by the Mexican orc, which, as I say, I don't particularly hate that picture compared to others from the current era. But I thought it was an interesting point. We talked about this before the show that you can see some of this implied setting on what, it's the classic, look at 1E PHB, 1E DMG, look at the Mind Flayer selling kebabs in the modern Spelljammer. And you can see there is a world apart in terms of the kind of game that is going to happen, and what players expect. And I think what's interesting is that the rules do support that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess well, on the one hand they do, and on the other hand, geez, I don't know if there's anything in 5e about getting kebabs and I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, but what's
driving.
interesting? Yeah, what's interesting there is how far does the game? How far does? It's almost like the rules. So yeah, in a way, maybe the rules stop mattering as well. Whatever rules there may or may not be, stop mattering if you don't have a play culture or a way of talking about play that makes the rules matter.
It's just nonsense. Yeah.
He does say on illusion, it's just enhancement manipulation. Can your
I was actually
NPCs
thinking about that.
by means? Then illusion. Yeah, if you see it as, do you allow NPCs to be tricked by you? Let's say, okay, I'm going to throw some ball bearings in the other corridor or whatever thing it is to make them go that direction. And you as the DM say, okay, I'll check their int then. I roll above their int, so they fall for it. In that case, illusions. I do adjudicate illusions in the same way, generally speaking, unless it's something which I would say I don't always give them an illusion check. I don't always give them a check though. If the orcs see some soldiers come out of the woods, they will initially assume the soldiers are real. But of course, yes, it's the same principle of do you have a system for tricking, a system, not a kind of a drama game, but a system for tricking NPCs. If so, illusions are the same. I think is a good axiom. So yeah.
I mean, I remember like when we played, this was with Axe, but we listened at a door and there were like hobgoblins behind the door. So I had the idea of just saying, oh, I'll just shout in hobgoblin while like turning my voice, basically like quickly come out, like again there's elves coming, right, or something like that, like, and then in the meantime
there's cookies. I've brought cookies, hobgoblin cookies.
I'm a sexy hobgoblin. Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
The hobgoblin camp followers have arrived.
Yeah, exactly. Or something like that. And then of course, you go into DM's arms race where you'd be like it would be like, well, they would recognize that you're not one of them. They have a password, like that sort of stuff. Maybe depends on how intelligent they are. Sure.
Yeah. I was going to say it's a fair point actually that hobgoblins might not fall for it because if your players understand that they are highly organized and militaristic, they
Yeah,
might
they would
not
just
fall
go
for
like
that.
password. Who are you? Yeah.
But do you know who
Identify
would?
yourself.
The orcs would, because though the orcs are
Yeah.
lawful, they are not high intelligence, highly organized.
Right.
We're talking about AD&D orcs here, obviously. And
For sure.
the gnolls wouldn't fall for the gnollish camp followers, but they might fall for something else. Yeah. Like,
The gnolls would definitely fall for the gnollish camp followers.
oh
That's
yeah.
not even
Not
kidding. Yeah.
gnolls, mostly known for being horny for other gnolls. That's
Right.
gnolls.
Yeah. Of course.
Yep.
Okay.
Great.
Well, with those words, I
Yes.
think
With
we should
those
call it
wise
a
words to
day.
help you run your game.
Yeah.
Yes, obviously, put your later thoughts in the comments, especially if there's more stuff we haven't covered here, because yeah, I think this is definitely a multi-episode discussion for some of the stuff.
Absolutely.
We haven't talked about fighters, we haven't talked about how the world develops, we haven't
True.
talked about the different elements of the world
True.
either. But yes, we will come back to this at some point. Ask us
Yes.
extra questions in the comments.
But for the coming episode, I think we're going to do something scary, which is
Yes.
I believe we had announced it before, but we're going to play live D&D with 2 people for now. Owen will be getting a party, and I'll be running.
Yeah, we will be doing that. Will be essentially it'll be our Christmas episode, more or less, won't it? If you think about it,
it will be. There's definitely the Peanut Gallery may, of course, yell suggestions that he should.
Well, I think this is what we're thinking is that they'll be my brain trust.
Follow. Yes.
Yeah, the players will be my brain trust. Sorry, the players. I will be a person
Peanut
with many.
Gallery,
the voices in my head. You guys will advise. I think is the way we're going to do it to give me a bit of extra brain power. Okay, then we will stop that there. Eidos had said it's Slow Train. Thanks, Slow Train. We'll catch you next time, and thanks everyone else.
All right, thanks a lot. See you guys back soon
in a month or so.